Welcome to the Modernize or Die podcast, CFML News Edition, where we keep you up to date with everything going on in the Cold Fusion community. We'll share the latest news on events, releases to engines, frameworks, libraries, and tools, as well as spotlighting quality content from the community. Modernize or Die podcast, CFML News Edition. Welcome back. I always say welcome back. Welcome! It's January 19th, 2021, and Brad and myself are going to give you the scoop on everything related to CFML news this week.
You'd better have been here before, so welcome back.
Yeah, hopefully. Hopefully you're repeat offenders. And
if this is your first time here, don't let it happen again.
So first off, let's just thank our sponsors, Ortus Solutions. Without them, we wouldn't be able to make this podcast. And we also want to thank our Patreon supporters, because without them, Ortus would have to foot the whole bill. But thanks to them, the Patreon supporters are actually paying about 60% of the podcast costs. So we appreciate each and every one of them, and we'll give you a full list and breakdown at the end. So thank you to all our Patreon supporters. If you want to support us on Patreon, you can go to patreon.com/Ortus Solutions and find out about our awesome packages. So, okay. So let's get into it, Brad. So we got some interesting, exciting things.
You want to get into it? Meet me on Twitter.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, you meant the podcast. Sorry, my bad.
Yep. So the first thing on the news this week is the Lucee Vulnerability that we talked about a few weeks back is now public, and so we find out about the people who got paid $50,000 by Apple to find this exploit.
We're doing the wrong job, Gavin.
I can break stuff for $50,000.
We need to be finding these bug bounties. I didn't even know this bug bounty existed. Of course, I didn't even know Apple used Lucee, so hey.
Yep.
But that's some serious cash. I think I read that Apple paid out over like $200,000 or something ridiculous in bug bounties.
$288,000 total for all the bugs or something.
Yeah. Of course, this Lucee vulnerability was just one of many that was found. But I guess that's how you find this stuff is you offer a bunch of money.
Yep, and so they found the bug. Apple asked them to give them time to fix it and make some other changes. And of course, Apple reached out to Lucee about the issues as well. And
of course, if Apple had locked down their Lucee administrator in the first place, it wouldn't have mattered.
Yep, exactly. So that was part of it. But they had 3 different sites, and they're all running different versions of things. So it's kind of interesting. So you can. We got a couple of links here we'll share. One is sort of like the more newsy write-up of it, and then the other one is basically more of a technical how they actually go and do it. So this was kind of interesting reading through it.
The technical stuff is what had been reported directly to Lucee. That's what I had seen previously, but the sort of overview was interesting too.
Yeah, so if you're wanting to look at ways that they go about breaking in, and because it shows like there's a vulnerability, but okay, well, Lucee blocks this. Well, how can we get around that? And so it's kind of an interesting way to look at how they get into it. And so
it definitely took them some digging to piece all the stuff together.
Yeah.
What's kind of interesting is whenever you read these write-ups is to look for the stuff that they look for, or just look at what the attack vectors are. Because if you're looking for exploits, not to do malicious things, but just to make sure your code is secure, you're looking at where do I have file write calls? Where do I have upload capabilities? Where do I have, path expansion that might have a ... There's all kinds of interesting things that you should with good measure be a little suspicious of whenever you see them in your code, because those are the common, things that pop up in these sort of exploits.
Yeah, exactly.
Uploading files, writing files, dynamic execution.
Yep, and that's where a lot of the code review stuff would kick in. If you're writing the code, you've got a good idea, and someone might come back and say, "Well, did you think about this? How could they possibly misuse that, or should we whitelist these, extensions, or little things like that?" And so that's why I thought it was really interesting reading through that. I didn't get through all of it. It's pretty detailed, so I have to go back and finish that up.
Yeah, they spent a lot of time. I mean, I guess they earned their $50,000.
Yep.
I was talking with someone the other day. It's almost a little embarrassing that how long had these vulnerabilities been around the Lucee and possibly Rilo before that source code? I don't know how far back some of the stuff exists. It's open source. We never found it, but then again, I guess nobody offered us $50,000 to spend weeks digging through looking for it. But
Yeah. That's the
At
thing
least
too.
at least it was reported. Oh, what's the word? I always say it wrong. Not honorably, but it was actually reported through appropriate security channels. That there was a chance to be able to fix it.
Yeah, it's not
I
one of those
guess
ones where people just say, "Oh, this is how you break into this," and everyone's like 0 day chasing your tail trying to fix
Yeah,
everything.
exactly. So I mean, at least Lucee people had like a full-on like month patch your freaking servers before the stuff came out. But now that it's out, I mean, what I hope doesn't happen is hackers everywhere read through this blog post, which is basically a how to hack Lucee servers who are too stupid to have upgraded and not locked down their admins. So if you're still hanging out there on the internet with an old version of Lucee and the Cold Fusion Administrator public, well, guess what? There's a how-to guide to come and own you. Well,
Yeah.
pwn you, as the kids say these days.
Yeah.
So, you've had your chance.
Yep, so that's just another reminder that if you haven't done it, go do it now, because now it's public, and it's going to happen. So, because I remember the FCK editor in the old days, they had one, and I had an old server, someone had that running on something, and yep, they got in there.
I remember when Adobe patched that, and then in a later update, they updated FCK editor, and then the vulnerability came back in. You remember that?
Oh, really? I wonder if that's how it happened.
Yeah, Adobe had it twice because they fixed it, they updated CK editor, and forgot to reapply the fix, and I don't think it had been fixed upstream.
Oh, dang.
But, yeah. And this is another good reason why, a little command box plug here, the latest version of command box automatically blocks Lucee and Cold Fusion administrators unless it's in development mode or you've explicitly said don't block it, because this just is too unsafe
Yeah.
to have it be something that's just served up out of the box. And I mean, Adobe's been doing that since 2018 when you use the IIS connectors. You automatically block external access to the administrator. And while it's slightly annoying, I applaud them for it because
Yeah, secure
the
by
truth of
default.
the matter is, yeah, people will not lock down stuff. They will run the installer, they will dust their hands off, and they will be done. So unless you force them to make it insecure, you can kind of guarantee people won't lock stuff down. At least everybody won't.
And that's the thing too. A lot of times, all the developers that are using it may know the warnings, but they hand it off to some DevOps person that doesn't know anything about it. They install it and they're done. I mean, it's not anyone's fault, but by locking down by default, you're at least removing that possibility.
The bigger the company, the more likely that is. I mean, I see people that come across the Lucee forum or the Slack channel, and they'll say, "Yeah, I'm not a Cold Fusion developer. I'm just a sysops guy, just trying to get this thing installed. How does this work?" And those guys aren't necessarily going to know all the little ins and outs that you may assume they know.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm glad that they're doing the lockdown by default. Maybe Lucee can sort of integrate something too with some of their they have to open things up. It'd be nice if they could think about that, but CommandBox does it.
So Adobe has a bit of a benefit here in that, given IIS, which is like 85% of all Adobe Cold Fusion installations, they have their own IIS connector. And so it's at the IIS connector point that they lock down the administrators. So Adobe Cold Fusion and this bundled Tomcat doesn't really do any of that logic. Now Lucee's a bit of a different world. I don't know what percentage of people use IIS with Lucee, but it's probably not nearly as high of a percentage. If you're going to use IIS with Lucee, you're probably using bond code, and it does have an option to block administrators, but it's off by default. And it's sort of a separate product from Lucee.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people use Apache Nginx, and they just copy and paste the same basic proxy rule, which is just send it all, upstream.
Yeah.
Adobe has a bit of an advantage in controlling a bit more of the ecosystem. You install it with IIS to kind of get the whole package, and they can control a few more of the pieces. Lucee doesn't have nearly as much control over the rest of your server, so unless they implement it at their level, or in my case, I implement it in CommandBox's web server, they're kind of dependent on you to do something. Now, what Lucee doesn't do, again, credit to Adobe, is Adobe has the IP address, filters as a built-in administrator feature. Only these IP addresses can access the administrator. That's something Lucee could do right out of the box that would improve it. Lucee doesn't have a feature like that. Administrator's just wide open. Hey, come and hack me. So again, that's a kudos to Adobe thing that they've put in several things. But Adobe got bit big time with several 0-day administrator-based exploits, and they learned their lesson the hard way. Yeah. Don't learn your lesson the hard way, folks. That's the hard way to learn lessons, is the hard way.
Yep.
And thanks. Charlie just mentioned in the chat. I mentioned IIS because it's the only one I was familiar with, but it sounds like Charlie's saying the default connectors for Apache also have the default protection for the admin. So that's good to hear that Adobe covered both of those bases there, even though I know Apache isn't quite as common for Adobe.
That's interesting that everyone's using IIS. I would have never guessed that, but I guess...
Well, I mean, I think that's really more of an artifact, the fact that most people use... I say most people. I'm basing this off the State of the CF Union survey, which I think was like 85% Windows for production deployments. Now, that may be trending a bit differently, just with more Docker and stuff coming into play. But that's my guess, is, historically people just threw Adobe Cold Fusion on Windows servers, and hey, IIS, easy peasy.
Yeah.
It's kind of been the way it is.
Yeah, makes sense.
Anyway, update your crap, lock down your administrators. Moving on.
Yep. Okay, so we talked about a little bit of Cbi18n in previous weeks. We had a blog post from Wil De Bruin talking about how he released a little module since Cbi18n version 2 was not released. Well, now it is. So Luis rolled that out, and he does put a big thank you to Wil De Bruin because he did a lot of work on that. We have some release notes to sort of show you some of the things we rolled out in there.
Is there a blog post for that release?
Not yet. It just got released this morning, literally less than 3 hours ago. But you'll see here. Thanks, Wil.
Nice.
Thanks, Wil. Thanks, Wil. Thanks, Wil. Thanks, Wil.
That GitHub release actually has a nice little list of release notes.
Yep. And so, complete migration to script. We've also got, I think the big thing is here is now you can use JSON files instead of just the traditional old school
the
Java
property files.
So
that's been something that people have had to hack in for a while. This is additional resource things.
Well, it's kind of cool. They got nested availabilities in there now too, so you can have a little more structure to your files instead of just having a completely flat file with crazy long names.
Does that mean like multiple languages inside the same JSON? Is that what that means?
No, I mean you can like break down groups of the file into nested properties. So maybe you'll have forms.
Oh, okay, yeah, because in the properties files you would have like a key name that'd be like foo.bar.baz or whatever. But in the JSON, it's actually declared as nested objects.
Yeah, so it's much easier to sort of just figure out what belongs to what. So you can do it like you say with dot notation properties. It's just not as pretty.
Yeah, and I believe Vil mentioned that there's some plugins or extensions rather for VS Code that work really nicely with the resource bundles in a JSON file.
Yep.
Back in the day, I used to use an Eclipse plugin to edit the properties file, which worked okay.
Yeah.
For what it was.
Yep. It's kind of nice to have that. So that has been released. It is a major release, so do some due diligence before you update. And yeah, we'll have to get some of those extensions added into the VS Code hint tips and tricks of the week sometime soon. And Wil said he thinks Eric mentioned the plugin, so we'll have to look at that.
Somebody mentioned it somewhere.
Yeah, I know Eric's been doing a lot with the CFCast site. Obviously, we're doing I18 there as well, trying to get more languages added. So
yeah, so check out the removed section if you're looking to upgrade, because this is a bit of a breaking release. The module settings are handled a little bit differently. We've dropped CF11 support. We've dropped Lucee 4.5 support. So check out those breaking things before you update. Yep,
for sure. Okay, next up we have a new ColdBox release. It's just a minor patch release here. So it's 6.2.2. You'll see if you're using ColdBox, you can just use update ColdBox from command box. If you're using standalone libraries.
It should be more complicated. Shouldn't I have to like download things and unzip things and get confused?
Yes, you should.
It's a simple CLI command. You just run it. There's a typo in the blog post.
Oh.
Instead of update cache boxes. Update.
Oh. Yep. Udate.
Editing.
But yeah, if you're using the standalone libraries, you can update them similar ways. Just spell it right. So we'll get that changed in the blog post. But yeah, so there's a couple little things there, but I want to let you know this new version is out. And the big thing there, I think, is they're using the Java URI for more resilient get full URLs, because we're getting some double slashes, and you may have noticed that in CFCasts, but they're rolling the update out for that pretty soon. So little bugs fixes, so nice little changes there.
Yeah, I think half of the tickets in this were some things that I did because I was working on getting the newest version of Wirebox plugged into CommandBox for the next CommandBox release, which will finally include, because this is a major Wirebox bump to Wirebox 6.0, which will finally include the new async manager, which came about as part of ColdBox 6. So I've been looking forward to getting that baby as part of the new version of Wirebox plugged into CommandBox for a while. So
cool. And then Patrick Flynn said, I think we could get more people on CommandBox with a CLI in 60 minutes course for CommandBox.
it wouldn't take 60 minutes.
Yeah. But Brad will also talk for 60 days about all the benefits of CommandBox.
So I just updated this typo on the blog post, and that only took about 60 seconds.
Yep. But yeah, maybe, I'm sure you can get some more videos out there. Brad likes making videos.
I do. I also have no time to do it, which is why I have a giant backlog of screencasts I would love to do when people stop asking me to do other things.
Yep. Well, another thing coming up here, CommandBox related, but this time done by someone else because Brad has no time. So this week's Ortus Webinar, CommandBox test runners, is going to be presented by Grant Copley. And so he'll be basically showing you how to create command line programs using CFML. So maybe that'll work, Patrick, for some newbies. They can come and learn a little bit about that. It's going to be this Friday, January 22nd at 11 a.m. Central Time.
We need to get Senor Ben Nadell in there too. I was just talking about task runners on Twitter a couple days ago. He was saying that he hasn't had the time to play with them. So there you go.
Task runners are awesome. So that registration link, we'll post that in the show notes as well, or you can just go to ortussolutions.com/events/webinars, I believe it is. So
I don't think we have that link in the show notes yet, do we?
No, I don't have it in there. I had it last week, and I must have removed it by mistake. So sorry about that. We'll
dig
get
it
that
up
in there
real quick.
Yep.
Webinars upcoming.
And while you're doing that, I'll tell you about Online CF Meetup. So we have a couple of online meetups coming up. So this week on Thursday, January 21st, we have Communication Skills for Technical Engineers and Developers with Mark Takata. And so basically this is a good set of...
Fat Panther on Twitter, if you're not aware.
Oh, see, I still always forget who Fat Panther is, so that's Mark.
Yeah.
Okay, good to know.
I didn't even know what he looked like until the first time I ran into him at Adobe CF Summit a few years back. And I'd been tweeting with him, and I was like, hey, stop by the booth so I can say hi. And he was like, I was there 20 minutes ago. I'm like, oh, who were you?
That's funny. Yeah.
All I know you are as this Fat Panther.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. I know, we've totally got to get our Twitter handles on our badges when we do physical conferences.
Yeah,
We've been saying that every year.
Yeah, I love conferences that do the Twitter handle and the Twitter image, because a lot of people have, like a panther picture, right?
Yep.
You see it.
Yeah.
Totally.
So that one is at 5 p.m. Central Time or 6 Eastern, and so you can go check that one out. And then next week we have a pretty relevant talk here: Online CF Meetup, securing a Cold Fusion application with Fixinator and FuseGuard with Pete Freitag.
Very nice.
So yeah,
I'll also point out that as a +1 for Fixinator and even the Hack My CF, Pete Freitag had it set up and ready to scan for the Lucee vulnerabilities like the day they were announced, because I contacted him and said, hey, add this, and he had it queued up and ready to go. So services like that will always keep you on the leading edge of stuff like the Lucee vulnerabilities we were talking about. You get that instant notification, hey, make sure you lock this down.
Yeah, Pete's got some great products and services, and highly recommend it. And if you haven't seen some of his sessions, come check this one out. Or even if you have, come check this one out. And he'll probably scare the pants off you, and you'll definitely think security for a while. But he's got some things that will actually help you fix them as well, not just scare you. So even better. So that one's going to be January 28th, and that's going to be 11 a.m. Central. So check out the different times. Sometimes we do morning Central, and sometimes they're late afternoon. So this week is the 21st at 5 p.m. with Mark Takata. Next week is 11 a.m. Central with Pete Freitag. So, and in case you missed it, they also had an online meetup last week where it was a CF Ask Me Anything with Charlie and Dan. So Charlie Earhart, Dan Wilson, we're talking everything CF, and that recording is up on YouTube, so I'll share the link for that as well, so you can see what you missed. But those are great sessions. They have the form up online earlier, so you can ask questions and they'll answer on the day. So keep an eye out for the next Ask Me Anything. I think they're being pretty successful. So there's a few different meetups and webinars to keep you guys busy. Okay, so next up, we have our CFCasts Content Update.
Don't we always?
So last week they actually released twice as much content as necessary, so we'll just highlight...
That's crazy.
So they released all the LATAM content, and then they started doing the What's New with ColdBox 6. So just want to spotlight that. So ColdBox 6, we had the HTML quick start, the testing quick start, and the whoops, which is the debugging template. So those are great videos. Go check those out up on cfcast.com. And I believe those are all free. So those are free videos. We have some paid content and some free content. If you're subscribed, you get access to lots of great content. But even the free account has a lot of good stuff there too. So
nice. Speaking of CFcast, did you and Eric talk about how to find the ITB LATAM content last week?
Yes, we did. You didn't watch the
Awesome.
podcast? I'm disappointed. But we can do a recap for those who are watching. So if you actually pull up the site, and you go to
CFCast.com.
Browse, you'll notice there's different languages up here. And depending if you're signed in or not, we'll save your preferences. But by default, the Spanish stuff is not on there.
Well, I believe it pulls from your browser locale by default, right?
Yeah, you're right.
So if your browser is set to English, then by default you won't see Spanish content.
Yep, and there are a couple of English sessions, even though because Into the Box Latam was mainly Spanish. There's a couple of English sessions, so I think Brad tried to speak English.
So John Clausen's session and my session are both marked as Spanish, just under that tag, even though we presented them in English. So if you want to see John Clausen's stash box, you still have to say, show me Spanish content, because it's all bundled under the ITB LATAM series.
Yep, and so the series has the language by default right now. We're looking at options to exclude or include. But if you do have an account, you can go log in and say you want to see both, and then that way your defaults will be showing up when you go to search or browse. But you can always check the button. If you want to have Spanish and not the English, you can see what's showing up there. So see all that LATAM content as well. And then, as I said, we also have the What's New in ColdBox. So that's the new content for CFcasts. Although, like I said, we did release it a little early, so it's been there a little longer, but still good stuff. Okay, so let's get into our conferences. So January 27th, we have VS Code Day. Yes, they have their own little conference day just for VS Code now. So the VS Code team and community will be having a live event. And the cool thing is they even have a session on hints and tips. So if you can't get enough of the hints and tips that we give you every week, they have a whole session on that. And so that's going to be live Pacific time from 8 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. So it's just 5 short little sessions. But they're going to restream it later, and then they'll have a live Q&A with the instructors at 8 p.m. Pacific. So that way, if you want to ask some questions or whatnot, you can do that. Or if you're actually working during the day and you can't watch those sessions, you can tune in after work and catch them at the later time. So it looks like a cool little thing. I think people are liking all these different changes now because so many of the conferences and so much online content and everyone can go to everything. I think they're getting burnt out, so that when they do something a little different, I think it stands out. So, and then DevNexus, your favorite conference or almost favorite conference, is going to be online February 17th. So what's the 3 things you think people should attend this for as a Cold Fusion developer? What are your big 3 pluses? Yeah.
Well, Luis and I kind of attend it for different reasons than other people might, because we're also looking for stuff that we can bake into our tooling and our offerings. We usually attend DevNexus to keep an eye on Java tooling, see what kind of new cool stuff is out there in the Java space. There's always tons of deployment type Docker, Kubernetes / Google Cloud Engine / IBM whatever / Red Hat, Redshift, OpenShift. Everybody's versions of Docker. There's always a lot of that at DevNexus, and of course that content is useful regardless of language. I don't know what the third thing would be.
Well, I would say Swag, but they're online this year.
Yeah, I know.
Because you said it was a huge vendor booth section, right?
Yeah, they have like 1 billion vendors, and they all have like just tons of stuff they give away in person.
Cool. Well, I mean, it sounds like there's still some relatable content for sure, and it's online and it's free.
I think most of our sessions are typically from big name people, or from people from big name companies like, Heroku, Microsoft, Red Hat, Twilio, Oracle. So
Yep.
they have a pretty deep pool of speakers that they draw from.
Yeah, they got a ton of sponsors too.
Oh my gosh, yes they do. In fact, the shirt I'm wearing right now, I got it at DevNexus. Half of my t-shirts come from conferences, and half of my conference t-shirts I think have come from DevNexus.
Well, I know they usually have the pretty cool JFrog ones there that we love so much.
Yeah, JFrog always has sweet t-shirts.
Cool. Well, so those are the 2 conferences that the community is putting on, but Ortus is also thinking about some stuff. And I know we've mentioned this in the last couple of weeks. We've got workshops coming up. We've got workshops with Quick, Command Box 0 to Hero, ColdBox 0 to Hero, ColdBox Hero to Superhero. But also, we're going to do some conferences. And so, in the previous weeks, we talked about our basic ideas of what we might do. So, we had more discussions, and now it's changing. As I told you, subject to change. So, because of basically online conference overload, we're thinking about, instead of expanding the number of events, what we might do is keep similar number of events, but basically change the formats and time zones a little bit more. So we're thinking about having a developer week in May and maybe doing Into the Box in person in September, but with the way the vaccinations and everything's going, we're thinking it's not going to happen in September in person, unfortunately. So what we might do is stick to our normal May Into the Box, but change it up a little bit. So we're hoping to get some European community members to do some more European time zone friendly slots as well. So not just in the Pacific and Eastern time zones, we can actually have the European time zones as well. Instead of having 2 tracks and it would be one after the other, we might split it up to be more like our old developer weeks, where you have a few sessions spread out. So if you're actually working, you can get some work done and take a break to watch a session or something. You don't have to worry about competing over well, which one should I go to right now? So we'll probably have like a single track and spread it out more over a week. So that's sort of some of the discussions we're having. So in that case, instead of having, adding additional conferences or weeks, we probably stick to Into the Box in May, and then make it just change the format, and then we'll probably do Into the Box Latam, so the Spanish content, in December. So that way they're spread out a little bit. We're not overwhelming you with too much content, but we try and make it a little different. Because I know last year at the end of Into the Box, we just kind of had a hangout session on Zoom, and everybody was chatting and talking. That was probably the coolest part about the whole event, right?
It was pretty fun.
Yeah. Because at conferences, that's what everyone's missing, is that just sit down, chit chat with people and everything. So we're thinking if we have a session every 2 or 3 hours, we leave the Zoom room open and people can just chit chat in between them and stuff. And I think that's where what we're missing from some of these online conferences is that general chit chat. And that's why I like the podcast. I get to chat to you, but we also get to chat with everybody in the chat box here. So anyway, so we're still planning, still getting things locked down, but that's the way we're leaning more this week. So we'll tell you next week if we change.
The too long didn't read is we have no flipping clue what we're going to do this year, but we're going to do stuff.
Yeah.
And most of it will probably be online.
Yep, exactly. And if you need more conferences, you can go to comps.tech. And just so you know, we're trying to get our CFML language added to that list as well.
Speaking of comps.tech.
Yep, so Adrian Sanchez made a little issue on their website, and someone closed it. But since then, we've had a few people come on here and make some comments. So, maybe you want to jump on there as well and say, hey, I care. So basically text.conf is, just a great little site with a ton of conferences listed, and there's no category for Cold Fusion right now. And so we're just trying to get it added. We want to put our name everywhere, right? So if you look at the list here, they've got JavaScript and, they got Java and Golang and Swift and PHP. And look, Swift only has 3 conferences. We have more than that. So there's all these conferences here. Anyway, but you can still add them under general if you'd like to, if you have a conference or of a conference or a meetup going on. But we're hoping to get the name added here too. So we'll share the link to that in the show notes. So if you guys can go and put a message saying, I'd like to see it there.
Yeah, the guy didn't think that CFML had a very good audience, so...
I mean, maybe in comparison to some of those other languages.
Show him that we do have an audience. I mean, all we're asking him to do is just add the topic to be able to tag conferences with. It's not like it probably takes more than 5 minutes for the guy to add it, but...
Yeah, exactly. But I understand if they put up Cold Fusion and they have like 500 languages up there, it might not be as nice, but... If they all bug them, then maybe they should. Maybe they're using it. So, anyway, so that's how conferences run down. So let's talk about blogs, tweets, and videos of the week. And we'll start with the Ben Adele corner. Mm-hmm. So, first one from Ben is, using a ray.sort operator has trouble with return values between 0 and 1. And so, basically, as documented, it expects to get a -1, a 0, or a 1 when you're using a ray.sort. A lot of times you can just use, math, and if it's bigger than 1 or less than 1, it still behaves the same way, usually. So he said when he was getting a little edge casey, he found out that if it's between 0 and 1, or 0 and -1, it doesn't do anything with it because it can't tell the difference, essentially. So,
I'm pretty certain that I had looked at the code for this once, because I think Ben had previously found that super long numbers, like integers that were too big, also had issues before. And I think it casts whatever you send back to some sort of like Java int or something. Which is why it both had a limit and why it truncated or rounded or whatever it did to the decimals. But yeah, that's interesting because I too have sort of played fast and loose with the sorting stuff and not always pass strictly 1, 0, and -1, since you can kind of get away with just something less than 0, something greater than 0 kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So it seems like a reasonable assumption that might have worked. But
yeah, for his example, was he was using it on dates. He wanted to sort it on dates, and usually dates are different. But if they're within 1 day, and you look at the way Cold Fusion stores them as essentially numbers with, decimal, everything within 1 day is actually less than 1 integer apart, and so therefore it didn't work. So
yeah.
So you go back to the 1 or -1 option for that, and that'll work. But it's just, again, interesting. Like you say, sometimes you do stuff and it works, so you keep using it until it doesn't work and you don't know why. It'll bite you one way or the other.
That's the trickiest kind of things sometimes, that it works on some but not on others, and you're like, wait, what's the difference?
Yep, exactly. And you only find out when someone complains that it's not working. So next up, Ben also had like a little reading recommendation. So one of their managers recommended this book, Escaping the Build Trap, How Effective Product Management Creates Real Value, by Melissa Perry. And so he said he read this last weekend and he loved it.
So what's the build trap? Does he explain that, or do I have to read the book?
Well, basically, they said talking about how we should worry about, I think it's in the next part here. It's about outputs versus results or something. I did read it, but no, there it is. Touting outcomes over output. So just because you output a lot of stuff doesn't mean you're outputting the right stuff.
Outcomes over output. Interesting.
So So yeah. So anyway, it gives you a little more detail about it. It's a pretty small book, so you can check that out. And it's not a long read, but he said it was pretty good because it was a nice style, but also that it gives him insight into what a project manager has to think about more than just being on the ground floor. So, but lots of little snippets in there, so it's a good little summary. So thanks for sharing that, Ben. Anyone who wants to pick up their New Year's resolution of reading a little more, it's a short book for you there. Get that knocked out. Okay, so Ben also had a couple things where he was just doing an experiment, as Ben does, but he wanted to play around with zipping on the fly from Lucee, similar to the way GitHub does. And so in this one here, I actually put the articles in order so it wouldn't be silly this time.
I'm curious, my first thought was, how does he know that's what GitHub does? But I assume maybe that's documented somewhere.
I think he's just assuming as well. But as he was saying, like basically you can pick any folder and request to zip off that, and so it's basically zipping it up and returning it to you one way.
Oh, I
or
see.
the other.
He says it right here in his opening paragraph. Their engineer had theorized that GitHub might be generating the zip on the fly. Yeah, because he was talking about how they have repositories that are gigabytes in size, and you hit the download zip, and your browser instantly starts downloading, and then it takes a while to fully download. So it kind of makes sense. The only way the browser could start getting instant results is if they started pushing it out. Immediately.
Yeah, so it was kind of interesting as he walked through it, and he has this cool little example. I think it's at the end here. Yeah. So you click the button and you'll see here he's got a sleep in between it. So he's like doing different entries. You can see as he's adding new things, but the file upload's going out. Of course, this isn't the way you should always do it. Don't just assume this is the best way to do things. But it's kind of a little experiment in dealing with output streams. I thought this was pretty interesting. And then right up after this, the next day he went back to, remember how he did deflated and store methods on zip files in Lucee? Because there's a difference if you actually use stored versus deflated, because with images you don't need to compress them again, it's just wasting time. And so basically he looked at the differences between that using the zip output stream as well. And so looking through it, he's got some nice results again. I just too long didn't read. So if it's deflated, it's taken 143 milliseconds or seconds, I think, to generate it. And then using 93 milliseconds if you're using stored. So stored doesn't try to re-compress it, where deflated will actually try and re-compress the file. Obviously, based on this, it's about 33% faster to use the stored for images that are already compressed. So, and the file size was negligible. Basically, the difference is there. So, pretty interesting. But
yeah, I never played with that, to be honest.
Yeah, he says he's still a big fan of using the zip CLI in Lucee. Pretty cool. So yeah, I really like all this stuff. If you're having to deal with big files and zipping, and a couple times I've run into times where we've had to do stuff like that, it would have been nice to be able to spit out the file right away. Kind of a neat idea. So pretty cool. So next up we have a tweet by Luis Mahano, and this one I thought was interesting because we're always talking about Ortus and trying to help the community and all the things we do, and this one actually put a $sign on it, which was kind of interesting. So Luis said Ortus invested $30,000 into ForgeBox in 2020.
I hadn't seen that tweet until I saw it in the show notes. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, so
and you probably use ForgeBox for free.
Yep, and so basically, ForgeBox is, our way to try and help the community modernize, and, so if you're not already using a paid account for ForgeBox, look into that as an option, or maybe support us on Patreon. And, this is another thing that Patreon goes into supporting. Like I said, Ortus is doing a lot of work and putting a lot of, money for servers and everything, as well as developer hours into projects like ForgeBox. yeah, it's kind of crazy to see a number on it when you think about it. Like it's a big investment. So anyway, so we just thought we'd share
How many
that tweet.
Patreon supporters do we need to get back that $30,000 we put into developing ForgeBox?
Quite a lot. I think right now it would take us years of our current support to pay for that. So years and years. So, but anyway, just an interesting tweet. So if you can, like I said, share the Patreon link. If you can't, maybe someone else can. So, again, just tooting our own horn a little bit, but there's a lot of great community projects out there. But eventually someone has to pay the bill. So, yep. Okay. So this is an interesting one. Another one from Ben about using Framework 1 to strip out the white space in Lucee. So
I saw that and I didn't read it.
So
and I was...
Yeah, so basically what he was doing is, he was basically generating reports. And so when you generate reports, every byte matters, when you're doing huge reports and a lot of stuff over the wire. So he was thinking, well, maybe I could use, the layout itself to do some stripping and to strip all the extra characters and space out of the files just to, just basically to minimize it a little bit more.
Is he not using Lucee's white space management?
I didn't see him mentioning it here. He also asked on Twitter to see if this was the right way to do it. He asked Stephen Nealon, since he's in charge of Framework right now. But
I'm just curious since...
Yeah. I'm not sure.
Lucee has built-in stuff for white space management, but I don't know if maybe he has that turned off or maybe he wanted to do something in addition. I'm trying to search his blog post and see if he mentions white space.
I mean, so basically, the report he was building was, several megabytes in size. And so inside the layout itself, what he was just doing is actually doing a body.replace on the content from the report, just to replace certain characters, using the regex, etc. It's, kind of a neat idea. I'm wondering how much of an actual effectiveness it had on it and stuff.
I mean, I could see it being quite a bit. I'm really curious if just... Well, I mean, let's see. Lucee, so Adobe ColdFusion has 2 white space management settings, just on-off. Lucee has 3, and it's like on-off and smart or something, and smart doesn't quite do as much. And I thought it was set to smart by default. I'm curious if he has that off. So, you ready for the ColdBox plug? Here it comes. This would have been easier if he was on ColdBox. So you hear that, Ben? ColdBox would have made this easier. ColdBox actually has an interception point called pre-render. And without having to muck around in your layouts or add logic like this into your layout, you can just register an interceptor, which could be, on production, off in development, all the magic stuff interceptors do. The interception point receives all the HTML before it's rendered to the browser. You can massage it, change stuff out. I wrote a module once that would look for links, I think, in your HTML and try to wrap an anchor tag around it just to show examples of what you can do. Interceptor modifies the HTML on the fly, and then what gets rendered out to the browser is the modified HTML. And it's nice and encapsulated, and it's just a single CFC with a single method called pre-render, and it requires ColdBox. So anyway, there's your official would have been easier with ColdBox plug. But this is still an interesting experiment regardless. It's just, it's a bit messier with Framework 1 since there's no concept of interceptors there.
And Chris G also responded on the blog post about using CF wheels. You could do something in that too, adding it into the views, because I guess the layouts sort of bubble up as well, so you could do that at the top level. And he was also saying, why don't you remove the new line endings too? Or whatever
I saw him talking about new lines.
Yeah,
there's a lot of white space you can typically get rid of and be safe, but then you always run into those little edge cases where you remove a new line character that was inside of a JavaScript block or something. Yeah, or a text area or a pre-tag, and all of a sudden you're like, crap, not that one. Which I believe the smart stuff in Lucee tries to account for some of that. But I'd have to actually look at the code to see what it does.
And then James Moberg said he's working on a ColdBox list JSoup CFC that optimizes the output as well. So
that's cool. And JSoup would at least be a lot smarter about where the white space lives. I'm curious what the performance is.
Yep.
But that's a cool idea.
Just remember, people, it's not cool to minify your ColdFusion code inside your files before another developer takes over. Because I've actually had to deal with that before, where I had to go and deminify my ColdFusions just so I could edit the dang thing. It was
You know what? I was helping someone on Slack. Who was it? Who was I talking to? They were asking about the CF Ajax stuff inside of Lucee. And I showed them where the JavaScript file is in Lucee's code repo. And the freaking JavaScript file is minified, like inside of the repo. It's not stored, readable, and then there's some build process that minifies it. No, the actual JavaScript in Lucee's repo is minified. So it's like, you want to make a change? Your pull request is going to affect line 1. Because there's only one line. It's like, yeah, that's not super good.
Yeah. No, it was pretty bad. I had like a 5-line file, and I formatted it. This is before the good formatters, too. It was a while ago now.
Oh, and yeah, it was all manual formatting.
28,000 lines. No, it was like 2,800 lines or something stupid, but it was on 5 lines. It was. I was trying to find this code and couldn't find it, and I was like, oh, that's because it's like 18,000 characters over.
It's scrolled slightly, ever so slightly to the right.
Yeah. So, yeah, don't do that, please. Okay. Next up, we have a blog post from Charlie Earhart talking about the next version of Adobe ColdFusion. So already talking about the next version. And so Charlie has 2 blog posts out. The first blog post is corrected, so I'm talking about the second blog post. And that one is the next version of after CF 2021 is going to be codenamed Project Fortuna. Not Athena, like it was originally talked about in previous
like
locations.
A Carl Orff song. Oh, Fortuna. Is that just me?
Just you. So, yeah, as Charlie said, he shared some news yesterday, or before this was released, and then he updated it. So yeah, so it'll be codenamed Fortuna. So it was a recent name change. I'd heard the Athena
I'm curious
a few
why
different
they
times.
changed the name. Like, did the name mean something? I mean, usually I figure that, code names just kind of like random. It's the point of the code name. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know they've been saying Athena for a while because I remember it from previous roadmaps, but they changed it due to some internal decisions, is what it says.
What the crap that means. What did,
Yep.
did the Adobe's legal team get involved and screw stuff up? Athena was the goddess of war, the female counterpart of Ares. She was the daughter of Zeus. Okay, all right. Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
She was a fierce and ruthless warrior. Maybe she wasn't PC enough. We're
Yeah,
sorry,
maybe-
you need to have
maybe
a
it's too
code name
violent.
that is politically correct, Adobe.
Yeah.
All right, don't get me
So,
started on that.
the more important thing about this blog post is what's planned. So, under the microservices category, basically they're looking at more productive REST or GraphQL, which is interesting. A lot of people have been asking about GraphQL for ColdFusion. API micro gateway for service mesh, which sounds interesting. And then CF on AKS, Amazon EKS, and GKE. I don't even know what those acronyms mean, to be honest.
What are they again?
CF on AKS, Amazon EKS,
Oh, so AKS is...
GKE.
I think those are all Kubernetes flavors, aren't they? Crap.
Probably.
Google Kubernetes engine? Is that the... No.
Yeah, I think you might be right. So yeah, Kubernetes, and Azure and Google Cloud. So what's... I don't know what the AKS... Anyway. So under the cloud category, deeper service integration, broader cloud support, and productive local environment for programming with cloud services. Interesting. And then...
It looks like Charlie confirmed that it's the Kubernetes engines on Azure and Google Cloud, so...
Okay, cool.
Makes sense.
And then the modernization, centralized configuration, language improvements beyond CF Script 2, and the VS Code IDE. So...
Okay, AKS is Azure Kubernetes. Makes sense. I mean, what happened to the 8? Back in my day, it was K8S. Now it's just KS.
Yeah.
Forget how many characters we jumped over. Just get to the end.
Yep, exactly. So yeah, good blog post, interesting, and I know that they had a public webinar that Charlie mentions where they mention the new name. So a lot of good content coming out. So and Scott said, "Productive local environment for programming. Are they building a new command box?" No, I hope that just means they're tying into more of their services to have like a development version, or pointing at a different service or something like that. I guess we'll find out. But yeah, maybe they're just going to reinvent .env and command box. We'll find out. So we also had another podcast released, not by us, but some of our community members. So if we look here, you can see that the Working Code podcast has a new episode, Monolith versus Microservices. And so this one here, basically talking about how InVision started using microservices in the first place, and they took everything and took it out of the core of their monolith, and now they're putting it all back in their monolith. So I think that it's a pretty interesting conversation about why they moved to microservices and why they started backing off of microservices. So that's a new podcast, episode 5. They're pumping out some good stuff here. So, and that is with Adam Tuttle, Ben Nadal, Carol Hamilton, and Tim Cunningham. So that one is released. And we also had a blog post on ColdBox 6.2.2. That one Brad's already fixed the typo in. Thank you, Brad.
I'm here for you.
Yep. And then we have another blog post by Charlie Earhart. And this one was something he originally wrote a few years ago, and he's updated it, modified it, and released it. So, did you know there's far more to the CF docs than just the CFML reference? And so, basically, he's offering all the different locations of all the different manuals and books. So, the CFML reference is what most people find when they're Googling, but there's also a couple thousand pages in the developing ColdFusion applications sections. Installing ColdFusion has over 100 pages. Configuring and administering ColdFusion has a couple hundred pages. Using ColdFusion Builder has 160 pages. ColdFusion Mobile Development, 70 pages. So a lot of things here are, more docs than just the reference, which most people would be used to seeing here. But yeah, that's sort of the big thing about it is there's a whole bunch of different things. They don't release books, like Charlie says, as often as they used to, but there's just tons and tons and tons of content in the site. So definitely, worth noting. There's a lot of different things here. Yeah, and he's mentioning this is for Adobe's ColdFusion documentation, not just CF's. But he does also reference CF Docs, which is a great resource too. And I like the fact that it shows all the different versions, comparisons, and everything too. So CF Docs is definitely a good place to go. Yeah, it's forkable too. You can make contributions. Whoa, someone's got more contributions than Pete?
Who is it?
Shade Rich? I don't know who that is, but they've got over 1,000 contributions. 12,000 lines altered. Interesting. So yeah, a lot of community members updating, adding examples, etc. So it's really good to see some familiar faces on here as expected. Oh, there you are, Brad. So.
Yeah, I haven't contributed much. I'm sure I'm probably towards the bottom of that one.
Yeah, there's some good stuff in there. And, my thing is if I'm using it and they don't have an example of the code I want, I try and make sure I actually get there and put the example back in so the next person doesn't have to do it. Or next time I look, it's there. So, yeah, and that's what everyone's saying is the working examples is one of the things that really, was tough with Adobe ColdFusion. Even the CF Docs, more examples is going to make it even better. So I like to see that too. So
yeah, the embedded runnable examples are really nice.
Yep.
Where they exist.
For sure. Okay, so that's our blog tweets and videos of the week. But next up, we have Find a Job, and just in case you were looking, we have a few jobs for you this week.
14 new jobs. Wow.
So I'm not sure if this was just one company and they're offering jobs at all the different locations or not, but we have, since last week, we have a ton of them. So there's positions in Ontario, Toronto, Frederick, Washington, D.C., New York, Irving, California, Scottsdale, Arizona, Austin, Texas, Atlanta.
A bunch of these almost have the
Raleigh.
exact same name. Are they the same?
So I'm not sure.
It is Amerisave Mortgage Corporation. You know what? I wonder if this is the same job and it's just remote, and they just posted it a bunch of times in different cities to try to get more eyes on it.
Possibly. But so there's a lot of things. There's a few others as well. So there's a position in Ben Lagaru, Karnataka, West Palm Beach as well in Florida. And like you said, these look like they're probably reposted. But a lot of different positions, a lot of jobs. So definitely check this out.
Yeah, a handful of these, like the Amerisave Mortgage, looks to be the exact same posting, but with different cities.
Okay, so Indeed, they maybe with Indeed they let them choose their city, and then it posted the same thing. So
I'm trying to see if it's a remote position. I mean, because they could have multiple offices and they're hiring in all of them, but seems more likely they're looking remote or for someone who will relocate. Yeah, I don't see.
It's remote.
Okay. So they just
pinged the major cities.
Posted it in multiple cities.
So we don't have 14 jobs for you, but there's still quite a few. Okay. So next up, we have our ForgeBox module of the week. And this week, we're doing the Cbi18n. So 2.0 version. It's definitely a big update here, and want to thank, Luis and Will for all their hard work on that, and then other contributions as well from the community. So we have it updated on ForgeBox already. The documentation has been updated as well. Will did a lot of work on that, so thanks for that. So you can find out all about these new JSON, nested or flat resource bundles available here. A lot of good content in there. We're really excited to have that out. And please give us that feedback. And again, it was a lot of work putting it all together. And so thanks. I really appreciate all your help there, Will. And I know that they had a lot of code requests, and it was a big migration. All that stuff from old tags. It was all living in tags before. So now we have our stuff.
18N is an old chunk of code. I mean, of course, it originally was the Cbi18n plugin back in the ColdBox, 1 and 2 days, and then it moved to the module, and it really hadn't changed a lot. So this is the first kind of big refresh that we've had.
Yep, and so that's our ForgeBox module of the week. Now, Visual Studio Code, hint, tip, and trick of the week. This one here is actually a new one, which I think might be pretty popular. So, it is the Stripe for Visual Studio Code. So, build, test, and use Stripe inside your editor. So this is a beta release of it, but they have some more information on the Stripe website. But the cool thing is that they're really making use of all the features of VS Code. They're using a lot of the events and logs, so you can actually see the logs flying in directly. And as you set up events, you can see the inputs coming in. You can set up webhook traffic to basically reroute back to your app and everything. So if you're working with Stripe, it's definitely something worth looking at. Luckily, we do have quite a few good plugins and everything, but this might be some of those things where if you're trying to create a webhook for your Stripe, setup, it might be good to be able to come in here and just register your webhook and test those events. So events can only be triggered in test mode for your account, just so you know. But they got some pretty neat features in here. So debug configuration and everything. And it does support several languages for generating, but they have also quick links to the dashboard and to documentation and everything as well. So it looks like a pretty cool little development tool for anyone who's working with the Stripe. So I know we use Stripe for quite a few things, but again...
Yeah, that is pretty cool. Yeah, we definitely use Stripe. I think we found it to be a pretty easy to use and comprehensive solution for whenever we need to do third-party charging stuff. And my understanding is it makes it so we don't have to touch, credit card details or worry about storing them on our end or PCI compliance.
Yeah,
it's all through Stripe's domain, which is nice.
PCI compliance is never fun, trust me. Done too many of those.
Having worked with companies that did their own credit card processing, I can tell you you're probably not taking the precautions that you should. Even better, don't touch the credit card numbers at all. Do it through a third party.
Yep. It's pretty easy to use with the Stripe stuff for sure. Okay. Last but not least, we want to thank our Patreon supporters. So, as we mentioned before, your money goes to help us with the podcast, Command Box, ForgeBox, ColdBox, Content Box, Test Box, all the other boxes, and it's very important to us. Patreon.com/Ortus Solutions.
Soon we're looking to be getting $30,000 from you guys to pay for ForgeBox.
Yeah, apparently the guys are fighting over who's going to win the lotto, so they can help pay the bill a little more.
I have those conversations with a buddy of mine all the time. That when we win the lottery, what will we do with the money? The only problem is neither of us play the lottery, so.
Yeah. So, and there's a few different plans. They say we got some starting support. It's just $10 a month to get started.
We need to have a plan that costs $30,000, and it's called the Pay for ForgeBox plan.
Yeah. And so this talks a little bit more about what we're doing.
I'd like to see the same number on like Command Box or ColdBox. And
I'd hate to see the one on Command Box.
And the thing is, like, some of these, internal libraries, that Ortus maintains. I mean, there's not even a log that tells the, hours Luis has probably spent, just in his own personal time that never gets logged to a ticket tracker or to a billing software. How much time went into making ColdBox? Who knows? A long time.
Yep, for sure.
That's how long. A long time.
Yep, all the other reading we do and videos we watch that we're not logging time for and stuff for sure. So, anyway, so let's get back to the Patreon supporters. We really appreciate your hard-earned money and how you're choosing to support us with it. So, thank you, Benedal, Brett DeLine, Calvin Stanton, Charlie Earhart, Dali, Dan Carr, Daniel Garcia, David Bellinger, Didier Lesnicki, Don Bellamy, Edgardo Cabezas, Eric Hoffman, Gary Knight, Giancarlo Gomez, Jan Yannick, Jason Dager, Jeff McLean, Jeremy Adams, Jonas Erickson, Jordan Clark, Joseph Lamory, Kai Koenig, Laxmer Terohadi, Mario Rodriguez, Matthew Darby, Matthew Clemente, Mingo Hagen, Patrick Flynn, Ross Phillips, Scott Steinberg, Sean Oden, Stephen Klotz, John Wilson, Synaptrix, and Yogesh Methir. Man, there's a lot there. It take a couple of breaths to get through them all. So, but yeah, we definitely appreciate each and every one of you. And if you go to the ortussolutions.com/about-us/sponsors, you can see the names and their pretty pictures up there too. So, we really appreciate that.
All right.
Yep. Oh,
it's been about an hour, so I guess we're done.
Yep, and I see everyone's fighting for the rights of ForgeBox. Some funny comments in the chat. So thanks again for everyone joining us in the chat and everyone listening at home. So thanks everybody, and have a great week.
See you next week.
Bye. Show notes for this episode can be found at cfmlnews.modernize.io, where you can also subscribe to your favorite podcast player like Spotify or iTunes. We also have the link to YouTube to find more videos just like this. The music used in this podcast is under a royalty-free license from Sound.com and Blue Tree Audio.